Hey, good morning. How y'all doing? It is Well Red Beard. It is a damn fine day to talk about a book, and we're here for my best of 2024. Now, I'm not really prepared to do this. I didn't have a phenomenal reading year. I read pretty hard, like January to March, and then I completely stopped, and then I read pretty hard, like October to December. I read 55 books total in the year of 2024, which is fine. But somewhere in the middle there, I kind of like dumped a lot of my books, and my number one book of 2024, I don't even own right now. So I'm going to do this number, and you're not actually going to see it, but it is still my favorite book of the year, and it's the very first book that I read of the year, which is funny because I only gave four books of those 55. I only gave four books 5 stars. And it's funny because my first book of this year, 2025, that I just finished, which was The Mercy of the Tide by Keith Rawson, I loved that one and gave that one 5 stars. So it feels like I'm on a trend of my first book of the year being really really good. But so yeah, so we're going to talk about them briefly, and then I'm going to put it behind me, and I'm going to do a better job on 2025 as far as trying to maintain my reading throughout the year. I mean, and then trying to also maintain the books that I read and not do like a book dump somewhere in the middle there. So yeah. So the only 4 star book, I'm gonna give you my top five. I'll give you a couple. I'll give you a couple honorable mentions really quick, and most of these come from right here. This little shelf here that I'm pointing at is basically October to December, and then as you see, and they're rated best to worst, and you see that I've grabbed like the first 3 or 4 there for this video. But White Teeth by Zadie Smith, I really like that book. I gave it 4 stars. It's one of the fewer non-horror books that I got to, and it's different. It's it's about a group of people through generations, multicultural, multi-race, and all these intertwining things with a really cool ending. But I did really like that book. I gave it 4 stars. It's right off the list. The one beside it there is Just Like Hell and Mr. Gray by Nate Southard. Um, Probably my second favorite like independent horror book of the year, behind one that made this list. I mean, I really, really like that book as far as page turnability and can't put it downedness. That was probably one of the top ones. I think I read it in 2 sittings. Again, it's 2 short novellas, but Southard's work is really hard to find. I mean, like that book there is out of print, and when I finished it, I went to find more, I couldn't really, not without dropping a lot of cash on it. So that's disheartening. But anyway, those are a couple honorable mentions. And then you see right beside it there, you got The Devil by Name by Keith Rawson. Read a couple Rawson books this year, liked them, but the one that I just finished in 2025, I loved. So um, I think he's got 6 books total. I will be reading the other 2 this year and be completely caught up on Keith Rawson. So definitely got into some enjoyable books. Okay, so my fifth book in ranking, is the only one that got 4 stars on the list, and it's Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. Really, really like her style. I mean, she's great with twists. She's great with the horror elements. I also read Sundial this year. It was also a 4 star read, and to be honest with you, those two were really close. But these two were really close. I think I like this one a little bit better, but um, I've read this Sundial and Needless Street in the last few years. I think the only one I have left to do to be caught up on Ward is Little Eve, and I'll be reading that soon. But this is my fifth book in my top five for 2024. All right, my fourth book. It's a novella. It's independent. It's John Bowden, Snarl. It's been a long time since I've talked about John Bowden. I gave this book 5 stars. Bowden is my flavor. He's my cup of tea. Like he does this um, combination of horror and crime and beautiful writing, and simile and metaphor, and some, um, I mean, for some it might be excessive. For me, it hits perfect. And I talk about him all the time. He had a book called Spung Onion, also a short novella. I loved that one too. I gave that one 5 stars. Jedi Summer is an excellent book, but um, I'm going to use an example from Spung Onion to kind of um, tell you, and I do this all the time. So I apologize if you've been around for a while and you've heard this before. I also apologize to John for using the same damn example every time. But in Spung Onion, there's a part where he talks about the two people are out on a beach, and or they're not on a beach, but the girl says, you think, you think," and he equated that to like that sound that you think to the surf at 2 a.m. And I was just like, wow. Anyway, so for me it's just my flavor. It hits perfect. But Snarl would be my fourth, and the ending of this one is just ridiculous. Like there's something going on the side of the story throughout the book, and the way it comes together at the end, it's really really cool. So Snarl by John Bowden is my fourth. Now my third is You Like It Darker by Stephen King. Now listen, is this a 5 star Stephen King book? It is for me. Do I dwell on that and think about it? And because the thing is I started back in October, and this is like the second book that I read, and this is the one that really got me going. I mean, again, all the nostalgia of reading King when I was a teenage kid was back in this one. It's got some ties to some older stories. It's got some 50, 60, 70 page stories in here that were the favorite ones for me. It hit perfect. It hit perfect at the time. Now, it's a book of short stories. Is it better than Night Shift or Skeleton Crew or any of the others, short story collections that King's put out? I don't know. But for me, like when I was reading it, I was loving it. When I finished it, I was loving it. When I started to think about the rating, I was like, man, I can't give it any less than 5 stars based off the way it kind of, rekindled my fires for reading. So, You Like It Darker by Stephen King. My second book on the list, this is the first time I'd ever read, that's not true. I'll show you the book. It's The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. I had read The Troop and maybe one other by Nick Cutter. And Nick Cutter is Craig Davidson. Nick Cutter writes, I'm just speaking from what I think here, really, but he's like Craig Davidson's horror pseudonym. He writes like the really, really horrific stuff now, which is crazy because this book is full of horrific stuff and horror elements. But this is my first book by Craig Davidson. So I love this book. Coming of age, local haunts, local urban legends, local ghost stories. It all comes together perfect in the end in a way that ties it up and brings it closer to home. That we have real, I guess, involvement, real again, like I said, closer to home as far as these ghost stories and the way they are a part of the character's family. So I just dug the absolute hell out of this book, and because of that, I've got 3 or 4 Craig Davidsons that I'm going to try to get into this year. Definitely have to read more Craig Davidson. Now, I told you my number one book, another author that, and this one is for real, I think, that I've not read another book by. I got it. I believe I got the book for Christmas last year. Like I said, it was the very first book that I finished in 2024. And it's The Reformatory by Tanana Rive-Du. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But that book for me was just a perfect, and there's a lot of books that touch, historical fiction and horror together. But for me, it was a perfect combination of the two. It was a perfect marriage of, this, um, you know, early 20th century race relations in a young boys' prison. And the horror elements and the hauntings that go on, and the kind of um, the African American folklore and stuff that's pulled in there. It was just a phenomenal read. I absolutely loved The Reformatory by Tanana Rive-Du, And because of that, I'm going to read some more Due this year. I think I've got Joplin's Ghost and a couple others that I want to get into. But yeah, so those are my top 5 books that I read in 2024. Again, I only got through 55, but I wanted to do this. I wanted to have it on record, so I knew, and so and so next year, I can pit the top 5 from this year against the ones from last year, and so on and so forth. So it's been Well Read Beer. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying all your books, all of them, as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.